With all of the news around Mercedes being the engine masters for 2026, the assumption is that Mercedes is the favourite team to be with for any driver for 2026, and is why everyone wanted Max to go to Mercedes. However, I don't think it is the favourite, and here's why. So look, obviously the reason why everyone thinks that Mercedes is going to be the favourites for next year is because there is a brand new engine regulation set kicking off. And it is fair to think that Mercedes will be the one at the top of this. And just to point out, from all reports and everyone I've spoken to in the Formula One paddock, they are likely to have the best engine at the moment. The dyno tests apparently are showing that it's better than basically what every other team is reporting or internally reporting. So it does look like they'll have the best engine. And look, I think everyone would expect that given how far ahead of the field they were in 2014. But it's not really the engine where I think they'll have problems. I think that's in the aero. But I'll get to that in a minute. The one thing I want to point out first, though, is we shouldn't all just take it at face value that the engine will be the best. Because even then, things can happen. And let's think about this for a few minutes. The man who headed up HPP back in the 2014 regulations was Andy Kell. And Andy Kell is now working with Aston Martin and is the CEO and team principal of that team, and therefore he's gone. On top of that, 200 plus staff from HPP, the guys who build the Mercedes engine, design the Mercedes engine, high performance powertrains, that side of Mercedes, have left for Red Bull's powertrain division, and we don't know really what big characters went, who was involved with what, and who replaced them. We can get some of that information, but we don't know the full picture. Only really they do. So it's important to know that this isn't the same engine manufacturer from 2014. On top of that, this is a very different situation. As soon as it was announced that there was going to be a new engine regulation set, it was a V6 with a hybrid, just like the current regulations, but much more powered on the hybrid side. So unlike the last time where Mercedes got a huge head start by kind of testing every different format that it could be, everyone kind of kicked off development of these engines around the same time. So Mercedes didn't have the head start we would have expected before. On top of that, remember that in 2014, when these new engines came in, I know hybrids have been around for a long time, but a lot of the manufacturers who were building hybrid powertrains for this situation hadn't actually built them before. Ferrari didn't build any hybrids back then at all. It had no electrification in its road cars, so therefore this was pretty new for it. Mercedes, though, did. Mercedes had a lot of hybrid technology back then, even though it wasn't in some of their flagship cars. They were building a lot of electrification, so they knew the thing inside and out. Plus, they had been building Formula One engines for a long time, so that also helps. Now, though, every single company who is building any engine on the grid has a lot of people behind them for the electrification side. And the figures we're hearing at the moment are very much about the V6's output. We're hearing around 572 horsepower, with some of the teams reporting as low as 500 horsepower. A massive difference if that is to be believed. But that doesn't tell us about the electrification side, which could be much more important. The other thing we need to bear in mind too is that just like the aerodynamics, the way that these engines perform on a dyno could be very different to the real world. You could be hearing that Mercedes have 572 horsepower, whereas Audi only have 500, but it could turn out in the real world, the way that it employs that 500 is actually better for balance with electrification and gives you more performance over a lap, even if it's slightly slower in a straight line, for example, or, runs out of power in a straight line. Just like how the downforce of the aerodynamics for Mercedes when it came to the Zero Pod was obviously seen as a much more advantageous way to go. These things can happen. So as much as I do personally even buy into the fact that Mercedes should have the best engine for next year, we should bear in mind that it's not a set thing. Just because Mercedes was best before doesn't mean they're best now. And Ferrari have always been brilliant at engines. Honda are brilliant in engines and have a lot of data from the engine that's still running in the Red Bull car, which is fighting for a title, for example. So there's nothing to say that those guys won't also come with brilliant engines, where even if Mercedes are the best, the difference can be overcome by aero, which brings me into the key part. At the moment, the favorites for building the aero, and therefore what is possibly the best car, which I'll get onto why in a minute, are McLaren, Red Bull, and Aston Martin. Now, I say Red Bull to the surprise of many because, look, let's think about this for a minute. When the concept for these regulations, even though until January 1st we didn't have a final regulation set, the concept for these regulations has been being thought out for a few years now. And the teams had a good idea of roughly what was going to be made. Some of the active aero was changed, but the general idea was there. And Newey would have been already guiding the team on what are the most important areas in a regulation set like that to focus on, guiding them in the right direction. So the thing is, when it came to the 2022 regulations, Newey's pinpointing of the suspension being so important was what gave Red Bull the edge over everyone else, essentially. It's not as simple as that, but essentially. And therefore, Red Bull might already be on the right path. What could hurt them is if they've followed Newey's path instead of the current teams, there might be a lack of understanding there and pitfalls that they fall into. But my point is, they've got Pierre Vacher and Enrico Balbo leading the team, who you might have noticed are fucking incredible, and anyone who thought they should be replaced with Jody Egginton is, as far as I'm concerned, a moron in capital letters. So Red Bull could be right up there. They've got a great aero team built by a great team principal, Christian Horner. More on that in another video. Aston Martin obviously have Newey, and they've got an incredible aero team with new facilities, new wind tunnel, everything. So I'm expecting them to be good. I don't know if they'll be best, though. There's a lot to work on there. Who I do think should be best at the moment is the current team, who is best and are currently being caught up on because they stopped bringing upgrades in May, I want to say, something like that. Like, they stopped bringing upgrades a long time ago, so Red Bull is now catching them, which is fair. Plus, I think Red Bull's concept was good. I think they just needed to fix some things. They've unlocked it. Great. Anyway, the point is McLaren have been the best team at developing a car out of the gate this season and from kind of the midpoint last season. And also, the point is as well that every time they bring something to the track that they think will work, correlates very, very well for them. McLaren are led by Andrea Stella and Zach Brown, who are giving the team everything. They've got Rob Marshall, who's brilliant at finding workarounds in regulation sets, and we know this from his time at Red Bull. We're seeing it now here. You've got Peter Prodromou, who is fantastic, Neil Holdy, just a wonderful team of engineers with everything they need to build a car. And at the moment, they are building a much better car than Mercedes, which brings us full circle back to the point. If Mercedes even do have the best engine next year, they will not, as far as I'm concerned, as far as it looks at the moment, have the best car. Now, obviously, like everything in F1 here, I could be wrong. For all we know, Audi will show up with the best car next year. That's how F1 works sometimes. But the reason I'm saying this is because for the last 4 seasons, including this one, Mercedes have been absolutely lost when it comes to aero. Now, James Allison is absolutely fantastic, but even during the dominant era of Mercedes from 2014 to 2021, they never had the best aero. Full stop. It's always been a weakness of theirs. They've always had the best engine during that time, but Ferrari and Red Bull beat them a lot because their aero was better at various points throughout the season, and they got an engine to be close enough. The aero was never the strong point, and I think this regulation set, where the aero has been so much more complex in its design, has really shown that up. Ever since they came with the highest downforce model back in 2022, which was the zero side pod, showing a complete lack of understanding of the fundamentals of these regulations. Not that they were the only ones, but they did have a lack of understanding. They have been just nowhere. And every time they win or lose, we get the same talking point. We don't really know why. And I'm sorry, but that's not going to cut it when next year we've got active aero, something that I reckon even Newey could struggle with, because when he worked with active aero, it was completely different. So not that he'll struggle, but he's going to have to get to grasp with it as well. And Mercedes just, I don't think, have a technical edge in terms of building that aero like McLaren do. So I think McLaren will build a better aero package. And you might say, yes, but McLaren's not a works team. Doesn't fucking matter anymore. I'll tell you why. It does matter slightly, but it doesn't matter anywhere near as much as it used to. for a few simple reasons. One, the customer team gets the exact same engine at the exact same time with the exact same parts as Mercedes do. So when Mercedes come up with upgrades, when they come up with new parts, new pieces, and engine mappings to make the engine faster, they have to give parity to McLaren. It's a straight customer deal now. So McLaren get the exact same engine as Mercedes at the exact same time. Two, McLaren will be seeing the engine in development during this time because they're already a customer anyway, and therefore they will already be thinking about their concepts, packaging, and know that sort of thing well in advance. I know that's obvious, but just in case people were wondering. So McLaren and Mercedes and Williams and Alpine will all get the exact same engine. The advantage that Mercedes have is that they can build their engine specifically in line with the packaging that they have come up with. The thing is, though, with McLaren's team, all that does is limit perhaps some wilder ideas that they would have. It doesn't stop them from building a better version of what Mercedes builds. And also, can I point out, if Mercedes do any wild engine ideas like they did with the Zero Pod, this will also tell McLaren where Mercedes are going. So they'll know which direction Mercedes are going based on where the radiators and so on are being placed. And plus, for the most part, when it comes to the radiator setups and so on, McLaren can also start to develop that stuff in-house if they wanted to, bolting them on or shaping them around their engine. There's nothing to say that they won't be able to. So the simple fact is, I think that Mercedes probably will have the best engine for next year, but I don't think we should take that as a guarantee. However, I think that when it comes to a situation of 10 or 15 horsepower, I think that's probably, by the looks of the amount of aero in next year's car, an amount that you could overcome with aero design, which tells me that Aston could still beat Mercedes, Red Bull could still beat Mercedes if they're a little bit off, and even more importantly than that, if the Mercedes is best, I don't see why McLaren wouldn't be the best car next year. They're clearly a better aero team, overall completely. So I don't think Mercedes will be the best car next year, and as I've already discussed in an episode prior to this, I think that makes it interesting for Toto, because if he has, say, the third fastest car and it's not in the title challenge next year, he's now going to lose George and Max, more than likely. Interesting. Subscribe.